Hello and welcome to Dr. Yakman's Nintendo Power checklist. We are now on the guides. I've already finished all the magazines last year. It doesn't matter what year it was that I did it. Don't know why I said that, but I'd already finished those, and now I'm going to do the guides. I'm planning on 3 other videos too. One dealing with supplemental and special volumes that were not like the normal monthly volumes. And then a third video, this would be the first, that would be the second. The third video would be about Nintendo Power Supply catalog items and the catalog itself, items that I had bought throughout the years that was available. And then the fourth will be like a holy grail type deal, like extremely rare items or once in a lifetime items, or some of them I have, and some of them, sadly, I don't. So, for collectors out there that are hardcore, that would be the video for them. But this video right here, after the volumes that we've got, is dealing with the strategy guides. Or, as they call them, player's guides. Not to be confused with strategy guides. Now, these are the ones that are done, published by Nintendo Power themselves, basically Nintendo of America, or just Nintendo in general. But yeah, that picture right there is them on my shelf, on the bottom of my bookshelf. That is the Nintendo Power bookshelf. That is, it almost takes up the whole shelf. And they had ended the guides when Future Publishing took over. So this would be probably early Wii days. Maybe mid-Wii days era. So from that point on, Future did their own goofy stuff with the magazine itself and with a bunch of supplemental, special, one-off magazines here and there. But then they didn't do the guides at all. I believe Prima took over doing guides, but again, it wasn't official, and it wasn't Nintendo Power, and it wasn't published or had anything to do with Nintendo. It was just other companies releasing guides around that time. Surprisingly, there's only 3 guides from Nintendo Power Magazine, player's guides for Wii games. And this shows that around that time, Nintendo was like, okay, magazine is going somewhere else. The guides are going somewhere else. We're going to focus on doing other stuff. They'd already gotten rid of the Super Power Supplies catalog and the Super Power Club membership at that point. So, don't necessarily, I'm kind of blabbing already, and I haven't even gotten off the first picture. But it's basically, I'm just giving you a little bit of notice that that's the reason why they just abruptly end 3 guides into the Wii era. It started basically as the winding down of the NES era. Goes into Game Boy, Super NES, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, GameCube, all of those. They never made any guides for Virtual Boy. Anyways, let's get started here. But I guess before we get started, I got to go all the way down the list. There's a lot of pictures to go through, although this is just, I'm going to matter-of-factly go through these. I'm going to do this dirty, too. So in my previous videos, every year for Nintendo Power Magazine, I took clean pictures. I laid out all the books and just quickly took pictures of them. It's quick and dirty is the way I did it. As I will note on the checklist, the text checklist on my blogger, I've subdivided these into like 6 sections, and I may divide the video when I put divider points in on the YouTube. The first 2 are basically the 10-inch guides, and then the other 4 are the 11-inch guides. Now, when I say 10-inch and 11-inch, I'm just being approximate. They were approximately 10 inches high and 11 inches high. So these fit in regular magazine bags with magazine boards, but the later volumes, of course, the 11-inch ones, some they fit in the bag, or most of them fit in the bag, but some, or most of them did not have a board to go with them or whatever when I put them on my shelf. And as you can see here, you can see bags and boards, and that they're shorter, and that these other ones are taller, as I show you here. So I subcategorize this as the 10-inch guides first, and those have two categories. There's the NES, Game Boy, and Super NES, and then there's the Nintendo 64, which is the shortest section of this. But let's go through the NES, Game Boy, and Super NES guides here. So we've got the first 4 volumes, which, again, as I will note on my page, on my blogger, these 4 came with a new subscription to Nintendo Power Magazine, and I will be posting video commercials in Nintendo Power Magazine. It was weird that they had commercials for a magazine even back then, but they did. And this was the commercial that caught me and got me subscribed to the magazine. I didn't even have a Nintendo system yet. I think my mom was already planning on getting me a Game Boy, and I started around volume 27. And what really sealed the deal on this was that these first 4 guides were free. Now, they didn't even have pictures for them when they first started, as you would see in the commercial for this offer. They just had like plain plain covers, you know. But this is what the covers ended up looking like. The NES having a red theme, the Game Boy having a purple theme, just like they did in the magazines. The Super NES having a green theme, just like they did, again, in the magazines when they would do their table of contents in the magazine. They had these colors represent them or whatever. And then Mario Mania. Now, Mario Mania actually came out before the Super NES guide. This, again, like I'm note on my blogger, I kind of have reasonings for why I subdivided all these into different, how I'm listing them and showing them in what order. Sometimes it's by date, sometimes it's by the system that they were on, sometimes it's by the franchise, or some other reason, as you'll see as we go on. So, after that, there's Mario Mania. Those 4, like I said, came free with a subscription in around 1991. You got the subscription to the magazine, and you got a quote-unquote $60 value, because they were about $15 a piece for free. And that's how I got it. That's how I got hooked. And there we go. Now, every year after that, Nintendo Power Magazine made it to where you would, if you subscribed to the magazine, you got a free player's guide. And the first of which they offered the top secret passwords, the Street Fighter II guide, the Super Mario All-Stars guide, and the Mario Paint guide. The first one being this top secret passwords, which includes a lot of NES stuff, but it also had stuff for, I believe, Game Boy, and I know for Super Nintendo. So this I got for free with my next year's subscription. And I wanted it to be like I would get 4 free guides every time, and I was kind of upset about that, but whatever. Mario Paint I was all over, because I love this. The game and the concept of it back then. And I didn't have a computer, and, you know, in school, like, Microsoft Paint was like the shiz bomb deity. So I like doing the little clip or the bitmap art, and Mario Paint had a lot of that with the quote-unquote stamps or whatever. This was a guide for that. I wanted the guide for free because I had heard, and I note this on my blogger, that some retailers, when you bought the game, you got the guide for free. Now, the game was in an oversized box, much like Earthbound, and we knew Earthbound also came with a guide, but Mario Paint did not come with a guide. It came with a mouse pad. That's why the a hard plastic mouse pad and the mouse and the game itself, and that's why the box was oversized to fit the size of the mouse pad. But no, it did not come with it. But I had heard some retailers were actually giving the guide away when they got the game, because they were about the same size. The box for Mario Paint, the full size one, it came with the mouse and the mouse pad, was also about the same size or the same footprint as a guide laying down. So whatever. I've heard different things from different people. Some say, no, it didn't. Yes, it did. I don't know. I didn't get it for free, but I had heard it came for free. So I'm just noting that. This is the first time and one of the only times that Nintendo did a player's guide for a third-party game. And it's Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I was more of a Super fan. And by the time Super had come out, I guess it was old hat, but I thought Turbo was old hat. I think the reason why they hyped it up so much was the first Street Fighter had come to Super Nintendo exclusively and not to the Sega Genesis, which was a big deal at the time. And so when Genesis got its own version of Champion Edition, that it was actually called Special Edition to avoid the naming of Champion Edition. There was also a Street Fighter 2 Turbo game that was brought out on Super Nintendo too, so wouldn't be left out. Super also came to both systems, and from what I remember, the games, the Genesis versions with the 6-button controller was pretty awesome, actually. More arcade control-ish type, and faster. So the Turbo and the Super Speeds were pretty fast comparatively to Nintendo, but overall everything else was better on the Super Nintendo versions. So a little bit of insight there. Anyway, moving on to the next one. Super Mario All-Stars. Now, I think I had bought this mistakenly multiple times. This was the best of the ones that I had, and I just sold the other ones. I don't know if this one was offered free, because there was a time when they had released the game, and then they released a Super Nintendo bundle that had 2 controllers, the game, or actually a multi-cart that had Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars all on one cartridge. And then some stores, I heard, but this is less confirmation than when they did the Mario Paint thing, because I heard multiple people say that it came with this, whereas I think it was just a retailer thing where they threw this guide in. I did not get that version of the Super Nintendo. I got my Super Nintendo before then. It was just the plain set that only came with one controller and no game. But, wait a minute. Yeah, it just came with one controller. Had to look at my box to make sure. But yeah, this was a guide that was available in Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3. This was the Pushing for Rare. I put them together because it's the same franchise, even though they came out at different times. Likewise, the Link's Awakening came out before A Link to the Past. Link's Awakening was came out before those Donkey Kong Country games did, but I'm separating this by kind of like by franchise, but I don't need to explain it. That's how I got it listed on the in this video, and that's how I got it listed when I took the pictures, and how I got it listed on my blogger. So if you want to check out the list, the checklist that is. So also to note, when I listed these on my blogger, I list them as the names that they were on the binding. Sometimes the names of the cover on the cover would be different than the ones on the binding. They had extra words or whatever was the words. They couldn't fit as many words on the binding, so blah, blah, blah. That's just a little side note. And I put this one before A Link to the Past. As you can see, a lot of these have the same theme. They have this rectangle in the center with a theme on top of a picture, usually, in Zelda's case, a map of the world that you were in. Next one was Super Metroid. Oh, man. And I had found a mistake in here, and I completely forgot about it until I just looked at this. Metroid is my favorite franchise. And I list this one next because it's, you know, to me, after Mario and Zelda at the time, Metroid was top tier. And my Super Metroid guide, I remember there's an error in the guide itself. They're never going to do a reprint, and they never did back then. But there was, it tells you that in a certain, I can't remember what area it was. Man, I'm remembering this now off the top of my head because I would call them, and I was an anally nerdy, dorky kid back then doing this, and what an idiot. But I was right. It was telling you that there was a certain amount of missiles in this one area, but when you counted up all the missiles from that, it ended up being, I think, 101% of items, which there's only 100 items. There's not 101. So, blah, blah, blah. That's beside the point. When you open this guide, nearer towards the center, well, no, nearer towards the beginning, it's almost like a centerfold. There is, it folds out like a book. It's Samus Aran at full power and on the one side, and then without the power suit on the other. This is the same picture that they used in the Super Metroid comic book in the mainline magazine. So they split that up, and then when you open it up, this is just what it looks like before you open it up. Then it makes a map of the areas of Zebes, or Zebes, or however you want to pronounce it. And this is where I found the error. And one of these, it tells you how many missiles are in each area. And one of them said that there was one more missile than there should have been. Blah, blah, blah. That was what I was calling them about and being a little prick about. So the next one is Killer Instinct. Man, this was a big deal. And this was leading up into Nintendo 64. But before we get there, the next volume is Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. To note, the Mario Mania guide came with kind of a Super Mario World playthrough, but it also it had Mario history stuff and interviews and stuff like that. Blah, blah, blah. So, and then the next one is Super Mario RPG. Now, this is right at the end of the Super Nintendo era. Legend of the Seven Stars. Final Fantasy III, which is actually 6, but whatever. And then they also had a Chrono Trigger guide. This is one of those ones that's harder to get a hold of. I don't know if it's because they didn't have it for as long as a time and it wasn't as big a name as Final Fantasy, but there you go. And then we go back to Game Boy, but that's because this is like right at the end. This is at the cusp of Game Boy going to Game Boy Color. And the says that it comes with 150 Pokemon stickers inside. It's all on one sheet, and it's near the end of the magazine. There's actually a Nintendo Power sticker there, too. And I think a Pokemon sticker up in the corner. This whole thing is a sticker sheet, and they're really tiny stickers. But there you go. And it goes to Mew, which is 150. They correct this later on with 151 in the next Pokemon guide. Now, again, it says the official player's guide on here. But when you just look at the binding, it just says Pokemon, and that's it. And then I put this as an exception, even though I'm going to Game Boy and then going back to the Super Nintendo. This is Earthbound. Now, this one's an exception because the only way that you can get this one was from buying the game itself. There were, and I covered this in my videos, I think it was Illusion of Gaia or Jaya, however you want to say it. That game, when you bought the game, came with like a miniature player's guide or strategy guide instead of an instruction booklet, and it said Nintendo Power on it. Well, they did one further by making a full-size player's guide for Earthbound, and that's why the box for Earthbound was oversized. Now, there's a documentary coming out here pretty soon about the Earthbound experience in America when they brought it over here, and it's it's a bittersweet story between fans and Nintendo and yada yada yada. But regardless, the only way to get this guide was to buy it, or it came with the Earthbound game. So there was no instruction booklet for Earthbound. It just came with the player's guide. Much like I said, the instructions were replaced for Illusion of Gaia. And I don't know if this was one of those cases where they thought that Americaners couldn't handle RPGs, and so they had to walk them through it more, Nintendo Power Magazine was used kind of as a marketing arm, not just for those kind of games, role-playing games in America. They popularized them, JRPGs, I should say, because on the PC or early computer and in the first, second, and third generations of video game consoles, we already had things like Ultima and stuff like that. I was not into PC gaming, and I still am not, but that is like Western RPGs. And they should have seen that, I guess they thought that we were kids or that we were dumb, and that's why they made, Final Fantasy Tactics and all that other crazy, goofy stuff that they did to try to, why aren't these games selling well in America? Or they were selling well enough considering what they were. And, but I guess they just they spent more money on marketing it and pushing it. But really what ended up selling JRPGs to most people these days was, unfortunately, Final Fantasy VII and the full motion video commercials. That's less about the game and more about the story and more about the visuals and more. That's silliness, but whatever. And like I said, it came with the game itself, and it was an oversized box, and yeah, that was the only way to get the guide. So it's kind of a holy grail. Now we're on to the next section, which is the 10-inch guides for Nintendo 64 games. Now this is a shorter section, so I'm going to try to blaze through this a little bit faster here. You got Super Mario 64, and you got Mario Kart 64, and bonus bumper stickers. So in the back of the magazine, there is a page that's, half-page bumper stickers. I never took mine out, but I've seen people put them on all kinds of stuff throughout the years. And then there's Yoshi's Story, which I love this game. And since it has like the pop-up book feel, they put a little pop-up. This is all like curved paper in the back of the guide. And you close it like as if it's a storybook, and the end on the other side of it. But when you open it up, it looked like this, the Yoshi's and the fruit popping up out at you. So, okay, next volume is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Many people's favorite Zelda game. Star Fox 64. I love the whole color scheme. You'll notice this with this, and with Yoshi's Story, and with Mario Kart and Mario 64. The color theme that I guess are matching the controller and the buttons. So because there was a blue and green button, there's a red button, which was the start button, and then there was the yellow buttons. So you got that color scheme there, and those were also the first 4 colors of the Nintendo 64 controller. Also represented the 4 players. It was a 4-player system. There's the theme continuing there. Diddy Kong Racing, Player's Guide. Banjo-Kazooie. GoldenEye, which actually probably came out before Banjo-Kazooie, but again, I'm putting these in a certain order based on, who made them, and you know, whether they were a first-party thing or a third-party thing, or whether they were like a video game franchise, which this isn't. It's a movie franchise, but they turn it into a video game, and also a movie franchise. So that's the end of this section, the Nintendo Power player's guides that were 10-inch tall, about 10-inch, I should say. Now we're going to get into the taller guides. This is outside of Nintendo 64. Well, it's still Nintendo 64, you'll see, but I'm going to start off with Game Boy. So the next section is Game Boy and Nintendo 64 11-inch guides. Oh, wait a minute. Before I do that, this was the last of the 10-inch guides. I'm stupid. Yeah, these two were for... this was right around when Episode 1 Racer came out, which was a big deal back then. So here we are with Game Boy, the Oracle of Seasons and the Oracle of Ages. And how it's listed on the binding is just, you know, a slash, Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons with a semicolon, slash, Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages with a semicolon. And then to correct that mistake of the 150 stickers before, here's the special edition for yellow, red, and blue. So this is the Pikachu edition of the game, but on the binding it just says Pokemon Special Edition. I don't know if they thought that at this time when they were making the guides, they were like, well, this Pokemon thing is here now, but, you know, we'll see. Oh, it was here and it continued to go. And then here are those stickers. Goes all the way to Mew instead of just Mewtwo. These stickers look a little bit higher quality, although they seem to be a little bit smaller. And notice, because of the special edition and because the Game Boy Color had come out at this time, it was the sprites are more colorized like they were in the Game Boy Color. When you're playing it on Game Boy Color, I should say. Yellow, red, and blue were all technically Game Boy Color games, but they could be played on the original Game Boy as well. So it wasn't until the half step of the second generation after Gold and Silver that we actually have a Game Boy Color Game Boy Pokemon game, and that was Crystal, which comes after the trading card game. Now this one is a Holy Grail one too, and I do not have this. I thought I had it. I don't know why I would have bought this when it tells you that there's a card in there, and I bought it without the card. Something tells, it makes me feel like I got ripped off, like somebody stole it or something. Took it from the magazine. But near towards the, I would say, maybe the middle of the magazine, there was a envelope. It's Wizards of the Coast, and it was blue. It was like a dark or a navy blue envelope, and then you tore it out, and inside of it was a Black Star holographic promo card for Venusaur. I don't have that. I need to get that, but that's kind of an expensive item because it was one of the first Pokemon cards, and it was back then when they didn't know it was going to be such a big thing. But this is it says trading card game for Game Boy, but the actual name on the binding is just the trading card game. That's it. So I'm missing that. And I have this picture here as a placeholder in case I ever get it in the future. I edit this video and put it on there. So now we're on to the next guide. Still Pokemon. We got Gold and Silver. And yeah, it says complete Pokédex on the cover, but it's just Pokemon Gold version and Pokemon Silver version on the binding. So, and then the next one is Crystal version. This one's the one that's exclusively a Game Boy Color game, won't work on the original games, and it's got a cool see-through. The cartridge for it has a cool see-through, like bluish aqua color to it. So now we're on to Nintendo 64 and the second Zelda game on 64, The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Then we got Perfect Dark, and as it tells you here, there's an exclusive Perfect Dark comic inside. The name of the comic is Graduation Day. I guess it's supposed to be like a prologue before the game or something. I don't know. They must not have included it to the magazine for some reason, and then there you go. Now you got Jet Force Gemini going through with the rare craziness. So you got Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Tooie. Continuing with the rare craziness, you've got Conker's Bad Fur Day. Now this one's kind of seen as a little bit of a holy grail too in the guides, because I mean, it was there, but it was nearer towards the end of the Nintendo 64's life by the time it had come out, so not as many people, I don't know, I guess they I know that I'd seen it in bargain bins, but then years later when you go to try to collect it, it's really expensive, just like the game. So now we're on to Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2, which you have to note, it has silver and gold, or gold and silver foil background on the cover there, just like the games did. They do that often with these guides and the games, and you'll see that as you go on. So this one also, since all of the other guides that are 11-inch have black bindings with white letters, this one has a white binding with black letters, probably to separate or have it stand out from Pokemon Stadium. So it wasn't just like Pokemon Stadium and then Pokemon Stadium 2. It was more like this Pokemon Stadium has a black binding and Pokemon Stadium 2 is different. It's a different guide. It's a different game. You know, maybe that's the reason why. I don't know. Might be exaggerating that. And then here's Pokemon Snap. They actually made a guide for Pokemon Snap. That's pretty cool. All right, now we're on to the next set of guides, which are the 11-inch guides for Game Boy Advance. And some of these guides are like repeats of stuff that they've already made guides for, because there was a lot of ports of Super Nintendo games on, and Nintendo games on the Game Boy Advance. You got Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3. It's weird how they name it that way. And then the next one is Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3. The whole naming structure with the Advance games was because they had Super Mario DX on Game Boy Color. You know, I don't know if it was a transition. I think it was a transitional game. Or maybe it was a color exclusive game. You know what? No, it was a color exclusive game, now that I remember it. I think it had a clear cartridge. And by the time they got to Game Boy Advance, they didn't want to re-release of Super Mario Brothers 1, so then they just called Super Mario Brothers 2 Super Mario Advance 1. And then Advance 2 was Super Mario World, and Advance 3 was Yoshi's Island, and Advance 4 was Super Mario Brothers 3. The best of them all. And then I'm continuing on with the Mario. I've got Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga on Game Boy Advance. And then Donkey Kong Country, another repeat guide. This one's the Game Boy Advance version. And then there's the Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. And it says, bonus, poster inside. And here's the poster, which actually isn't a poster. It's more like a two-fold centerfold. And on the one side, it says Hyrule Town Map. And on the other side, it says just Hyrule Map. Now, I would consider this the front side and this other part the back side. But regardless, it's kind of like a two-page centerfold. And it was perforated, so you could take it out. It also came with, which was kind of strange, but it also came with a guide for, or a fold-out poster that was perforated. It was white on the background, like a lot of these perforated folded posters are. It's not a fold-out, sorry, it's folded. Legend of Zelda, The Legend Returns. Now notice, this is obviously Twilight Princess, but up until that point, they did not give the name of the game. because this was going from GameCube era to Wii era. And the game was in a long time in the making, and they previewed the heck out of this game a lot in Nintendo Power Magazine. And even though that was a guide for the Game Boy Advance Minish Cap, they put it in there to, like, I guess, add extra hype for it or something. I don't know. And then you've got Zelda Four Swords, which is actually a Link to the Past, but then it had a 4-player feature, the Four Swords. Four Swords was also a game that they brought out on for the what they call the Game Boy Advance connectivity games that were on GameCube through the connectivity cable. But each person had to have their own Game Boy Advance and hook it up and do it that way. Blah, blah, blah. They made a guide for it. Metroid Fusion. And although chronologically this happened, Zero Mission happened before Fusion. Fusion is considered 4 in the Metroid franchise. I just put them together in this order. And then you've got Fire Red and Leaf Green, which are remakes of Red and Green. Now, we never got green in America. We got blue. In Japan, they got red, blue, and green, and then later yellow. We got red and blue, and then later yellow. And here, we got the remakes of the originals on Game Boy Advance, Fire Red and Leaf Green. But yeah, just like the packaging for the Fire Red and Leaf Green versions of the game, there's these, it's almost like, not holographic, but like foil red and green. You can't really see it here, but it catches the light a lot when you go to move the cover in the background behind the Charizard and behind the Venusaur. And likewise, the, I want to say, let me see here. No, Ruby and Sapphire didn't have foil backgrounds, but the coloring was much like the Ruby and Sapphire games, of course. This one, though, had shiny speckles all over it of foil in the background in this shine of the Emerald version. And this also has a bonus poster inside. This is near the, or at the end of the magazine, or not magazine, but at the end of the, what do you call it? The guide. And it's a perforated one. You tear it out, and it's got a, it's a folded poster as well. It's got a blank white background on it. So that's what it looks like when it's unfolded. Now, I tore most of mine. Maybe I should have took before and after pictures to show that they were virgin, unopened or whatever. But I ripped all these out so that you can see what these posters look like. I've seen some of these posters separate, like people will sell them separately on eBay, or I would see them hanging up in people's walls or whatever like that. And that's where they got them from, was this. There was a lot of other companies making guides at the same time, and they had their own versions of posters or goodies that came with them too. But this is the one that actually came with the Nintendo Power Magazine version of Emerald, the player's guide. On to the next one, Fire Emblem. Man, that was a big thing. And they brought out the second game on Game Boy Advance, too. Also have a guide for it, The Sacred Stones of Fire Emblem. Then there was Advance Wars 2 Black Hole Rising. That's so weird. It's weird, like I said, they didn't have a guide for Mario DX or Mario Advance 1, which is Super Mario Brothers 2, or Mario Advance 2, which is Super Mario World. They didn't have guides for those, but yet they had a guide. And they didn't have a guide for Advance Wars 1, but yet they had a guide for Advance Wars 2. Isn't that silly? But whatever. That's what they did. And Golden Sun The Lost Age. They didn't have a guide for Golden Sun, but they had a Golden Sun The Lost Age. I believe this is the second one. Or you know what? Maybe I'm misspeaking. Dear Lord, maybe I should... I'm going to do some research here real quick. I can't remember. Golden Sun is one of those ones that I blank out on. Yeah. So they didn't have one for the first game, but then they made a guide for the second game. The Lost Ages, the second game. Yeah. So, like I said, same thing with the Mario Advances and the Advance Wars. They made a guide for the sequels of both of those, but not for the first one. Final Fantasy 1 and 2, Dawn of Souls. This was a big deal. Around this time, Yamauchi was still in power at Nintendo, and him and Square didn't get along, Squaresoft, but, you know, eventually Final Fantasy games would start coming over to Nintendo platforms again. So, and then here's Final Fantasy 4, which is 2 in America. Well, 2 on Super Nintendo, I should say. Advance. And then there's Final Fantasy V, which never came to America before then. Advance. And then Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. That's such a... The Tactics thing is one of those things that kind of, like, whatever. I'm not a Final Fantasy fan, so I don't really care too much about it. I am a Mana fan, and I tried to get into the other Mana games besides Seiken Densetsu 1, 2, and 3, which is Legend of... Final Fantasy Legend, I think, Secret of Mana, and fan translated and then later on brought over as, I think they call it Dawn of Mana. Anyways, Sword of Mana, Children of Mana, those are other games in the series, but they actually made an official Nintendo Power Magazine guide, player's guide for this one. And now we're on to the next to last section of these guides, and that is the GameCube 11-inch guides. Now, there was a lot of guides that were brought out around this time. And to note, this was around the time when I guess GameCube, I don't want to say underperforming. I mean, literally it was, but in Nintendo's eyes, maybe they made some deals with some of the some retailers to have exclusive versions of the guides in their stores. I have listed some of the versions and on my checklist on my blogger, so you can check that out there, and I'll go over them as I go through here. But then there was, you know, I just have what I have. I don't really count those as variant covers because sometimes that was a thing that Nintendo worked out with them, and sometimes that was a thing that was that the retailer decided to do themselves with a sticker or a stuff-in that they shoved in the magazine or whatever to clear unsold stock, basically. But here's Luigi's Mansion, the first big game on GameCube. And then we've got Mario Kart Double Dash. And then we got Super Mario Sunshine. Woo! And keeping with the Mario theme, I've got Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door, which is getting a remake here soon. And Wario World. To note with this one, like I was talking about before with retailer exclusives, my version of Wario World, the game itself, on the cover, and it's printed on the cover, it's not a sticker, from Kmart, it says that you get the guide free with the game. So, there you go. I think it said while supplies last. And then we got Super Smash Bros. Melee. And then we're on to the next thing, which is Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. Now, this was in preparation for the release of Wind Waker. If you pre-ordered it, you got the Collector's Edition at some retailers. Blah, blah, blah. This, you can see my phone and my hand holding up the phone to take the picture. This is a reflective silver background. It's pretty cool. And then there's actually the Wind Waker. And then there's the Four Swords Adventures, like I talked about before, with the other Four Swords Link to the Past Game Boy Advance game. And now we're on to Metroid. Now, there was a Metroid Prime guide, and there was a Metroid Prime 2 Echoes guide, but not a Metroid Prime 3 guide, because that was on Wii, and like I said, there's only 3 Wii guides that was officially made by Nintendo Power Magazine. This one has like a dark silver reflective cover background a little bit, and also the lettering of Metroid is a shiny foil silver shadowy thing. So boom. There's 2 Star Fox games. This one was made by Rare, and this would be one of the early guides, one of the last times that Rare had worked with Nintendo before getting bought out by Microsoft. So there was a guide for that, and then Nintendo went with I think some part of the Ace Combat team and Namco to make Star Fox Assault, which this one comes with a bonus poster inside. Woo! And the poster also, like most of the other posters that you'll see in this video, perforated, folded in the back of the guide, and the back of it is just a blank white page. So, pretty big poster, and it's kind of cool. Got Crystal, Falco, Slippy. Now we're on to Pokemon Coliseum. And then we're on to a big one, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, GOD. This one has a... It has had several different retailer markings. I only have the one. I've seen the one without any retailer markings. I've seen the one with the Target one, which I believe just came with coupons is all it was. But this one was the better of them that I had seen. And it was the Game Crazy one, which Game Crazy was inside of the Hollywood videos. Blockbuster was where I was working at the time, and Blockbuster had something, I think it was called Game Zone, but only some stores got that, and none of the stores in this area got it. But a lot of the Hollywoods in this area, which there wasn't a lot left around this time, but they had Game Crazy stores in them. I think they had a separate entrance. They sold used games, they sold new games, they did pre-orders, they did all kinds of stuff, and including this. They had a exclusive offer, and it has Shadow Lugia on the front. And all it was just a little Shadow Lugia 2-page like centerfold that came out with a blank white back to the poster, and it was perforated. I kept mine inside because you can see it without having to take it out, without having to rip it out. It's at the end of the end of the guide there. So next guide is F-Zero GX. It's amazing in itself that F-Zero got its own guide, but there it is, and it's probably the best of the F-Zero games. I mean, the one on Nintendo 64 is awesome, and the one on Super Nintendo is awesome, but this was like kind of like the pinnacle. Sega, I think AM2 helped work on this game, and oh man, here's another amazing thing. Wave Race Blue Storm? What's next? A 1080 guide? No, they did not make a 1080 guide, official one. But yeah, that's cool. Animal Crossing. The original Animal Crossing, which was actually a port of the Nintendo 64 game in Japan, but this was the first time that we got it here in America. And this is a cool guide. It was a very sought-after guide because Animal Crossing had a kind of a early cult following even back then. It was, for some people, it was a reason to own a GameCube. And there was, with the e-cards and this guide and all the stuff that they were covering in Nintendo Power Magazine, I think they had a column on it every month covering what would happen during this time of the year in the game. Because it was, it was clock-based and calendar-based. So there was birthdays and holidays and all kinds of stuff that you could celebrate in the game. Blah, blah, blah. There's the guide. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, which is the GameCube Fire Emblem game. Awesome. Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2. And likewise, there is no Pikmin 3 guide because that came out after these guides stopped being made. So, Then there is a Battalion Wars and Eternal Darkness, which that's such a great game. Sanity's Requiem. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles guide. The Star Wars Rogue Leader Rogue Squadron 2 guide. And the Rogue Squadron 3 guide, Rebel Strike. Now we're on to the next and final section, which has a lot of DS games, but there's 3 Wii games at the end that had their own guides. And we start with New Super Mario Bros. Now this is Nintendo's second explosion with during the DS and Wii era. So I imagine that this is when Nintendo was like, okay, Future Publishing is taking over the magazine, and somebody else can handle doing the guides. We're not doing the guides anymore. I think Nintendo had gotten so big at that point that their marketing arm was like, we don't need to have the magazine. We'll give it off to somebody else. Let other people do the guides. Blah blah blah. Giving you a little bit of history there, but this is the winding down of the guides, the last section here that I have, which is the DS and the Wii 11-inch guides. So, next guide is Yoshi's Island DS. They really want to push Yoshi's Island, don't they? They have the Super Nintendo one, the Game Boy Advance one, and now the DS one. Now the DS one did add more stuff to it, and it was a different kind of game, but there you go. And Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, and Metroid Prime Hunters. And then this cover is sweet. It's a diamond version and pearl version of Pokemon. And as you can see, it says exclusive Toys R Us bonus poster. Now, again, on my blogger, I have listed different retailers had different versions, and I'm trying to find as much information as I can. This one came without that exclusive bonus poster and without the markings on it from Toys R Us, but I got this one, and this one was the best of them because there was one, without it. And then I don't know if there was another retailer that had something else inside of it too, like they did with other guides, but blah, blah, blah. And a very shiny cover, very reflective, dependent on foil cover here, depending on how you held it in the light. You got all kinds of sparkles. So just like the covers of Diamond and Pearl on DS. So, and these are the gem leaders of Sinnoh. This is the poster that was exclusive to the Toys R Us variant cover, if you want to call it that. So it's the gem leaders of Sinnoh for Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And this, again, is another... this one wasn't at the end of the guide, though. It was near the end, but it wasn't on the back binding cover or whatever. I don't mean like behind the binding cover. They just had it right before the back cover closed on the magazine. That's where they usually put these folded, perforated, blank white back posters. But this one was kind of like deeper in, and it was hard for me to get out without ripping it up too much because it was glued in there in a goofy way, and the back cover was starting to, the binding on mine was kind of a little beat up. So, but regardless, I got it out, and now you can see it. And I had never seen this poster before. So, first time for me too, until I just opened it up today to take these pictures. And then this is the Ultimate National Pokédex, not to be confused with this guide. They look kind of similar. But this one is a much thicker guide. Both of these guides will not fit in the magazine bags that I have, so they're just loose, hanging out. This one is especially thick. It's probably, I want to say that the one guide is like, oh man, I forgot to count the pages, but this one's definitely thick. And it has like a Pokédex for all the Pokemon up and until this point in the into the Sinnoh region, which I guess would be what, the 4th or 5th gen? I'm losing count. Anyways, I want to say that there was also a another version of these that was also Nintendo Power. But if you have these two versions, you basically have everything that was there or was to offer. I want to say that there was another variant, not necessarily cover or variant guide. It was just, this one is kind of like a little bit of a guide and mostly Pokédex. And this one is all of the guide. Whereas there was another one that was just, I think, just the Pokédex and no guide. Regardless, there's that. Because the other one that I remember seeing doesn't say 482 plus 8. It just says that it's a Pokédex and that's it. And it doesn't say Ultimate National. It just whatever. I don't even know if that was offered in America, because some of these things were only offered in Canada, which was weird due to retailers that were stronger in Canada than in America, I guess, or some kind of deal. Who knows? But we're moving on. Then there's Mystery Dungeon. Now this one, there was a version of the game on DS and a version of the game on Game Boy Advance. And you could actually have them together if you had a fat DS or a DS Lite, because they had both cartridge slots, one for the DS cards and one for the Game Boy Advance carts. So, you know, that was a cute little thing that they did, and they made a guide for that. And then the next guide, also Pokemon, is Pokemon Ranger. This one, as you can see, it says bonus poster inside, and inside the poster looks like this. It's almost a centerfold. It's at the end of the guide, like the other posters have been, and it is perforated, so you can tear it out, but it's got a black-white background. And I just kept mine in the magazine, or in the guide, because it fit. There you go. Folded it back in and didn't rip it up. Animal Crossing Wild World, the one that was on DS. Now, I like the Wii one better, and but they didn't make a guide for the Wii one. So, Advance Wars Dual Strike DS, get it? That was, another guide. And now we're on to the Wii guides, finally, which is Super Paper Mario. And then the next one is, it says in very small print up here, and I've seen this poster ripped out a lot, but it says complete Wii and Nintendo GameCube versions coverage, plus giant collectible poster inside. Not like they usually have, like a whole thing that covers the whole corner of the thing, or a brightly colored seal that shows you, hey, this has got a poster with it, woo! No, it didn't do that with this one, so you got to be careful, because I have seen these being sold with the poster already ripped out. You know, careful when you're collecting. This is the poster that came with it. Very similar to EGM Magazine had a poster like this too, but as you can see, this one says Twilight Princess, and previous posters, including that Return of the Legend and the Minish Cap guide, didn't say Twilight Princess, because again, the name of the game still wasn't decided or wasn't revealed yet. So, but now this is a poster, one of the first posters that had in any of the magazines or any of the guides that had Twilight Princess on it, because it was actually when Twilight Princess finally came out, and it was a guide for it. So, and then the very last I keep wanting to say volume. The very last Pokemon Battle Revolution. And this was Wii. This was supposed to be like the Coliseum Stadium game on the Wii. And it started off with a faint hint of Pokemon, and then ends with Pokemon. So many Pokemon guides in the middle. So, but yeah, that was the last guide that Nintendo Power officially had released. And then here's all the guides together, like I showed you in the beginning of the video. Thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be the supplemental and special volumes. Some of them are really cool, but once you got to the point where Future was publishing the magazine, you get into some crazy, like, here's a book of just posters. Here's a holiday pieing guide. And I got them. so you don't have to, or so that you can figure out how to do that. That's a topic for a whole nother video, which is going to be the next video. I don't know when I'll be able to do that one. Like I said, I did this one fast and dirty, just the way that I took the pictures. Not professional at all, but just to help you guys out and trying to collect, or just an information if you wanted to find out how many guides there were or what the guides were. I got it on my blogger. I got it on this video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.